So we've already spent a whole chapter in this course talking about how the Vue router works, how to create routes inside the router file like this, also how to use router links, how to pass route parameters and all that jazz. And we've been using that for all of the projects we've created so far since then. Now, when we use the composition API, all of that stays the same. We don't change how we set up routes in here or how we use router links or anything like that. The only thing that changes is how we programmatically use the router. So if you cast your mind back to an earlier chapter, we saw how to do this using the $router object right here. We used methods on that to either take us forwards or backwards or take us to a new route completely. But when we use the composition API, we don't have access to this $router object inside the setup function, much like we don't have access to $refs in there either. So when we're using the composition API, we do things slightly differently by using a router function inside the setup hook to get the methods that we need. And again, which way you choose to do this is up to you, but I certainly prefer using the composition API for a lot of things, including programmatic routing. But if you prefer to do it this way, using the composition API, that's fine as well. And you will still see Vue projects that other people create using different ways to do things. So it is important to understand how to do things both ways, both using the options API and the composition API as well. To begin with though, before we dive into how we use the router inside the setup function, I just want to create a navbar for this project we've been creating. So inside the components folder, I'm going to create a new file and call that navbar.vue. And then inside here, I'm going to say view and enter to boilerplate this. And I'm going to have a header tag, first of all, inside here. Inside the header, we'll have an H1 for the title of the site. And then inside that, we'll say the Dojo blog. Under the H1, we'll do a nav tag. And inside the nav, we want two links, one for the home page and one for the create page to create a new post. So let's do a router link for the first one. And this is going to be 2. Then we're going to use an object, so we need to data bind to this. And the name of this is going to be home. So that's the home route. And remember, we called it home right here. And up here for the link text, we'll just say home. Now I'm going to duplicate this, and this time it's going to be to create. That was the name of the create route. And for the text, we'll say create post. So now we have this nav. I can nest it inside the app component. So I'm going to first of all create my script so we can import it. Inside the script, I'm going to export default our component object, and above that we'll import the navbar, and it's from // then into components, and then we want the navbar.vue file. So we can now register the components right here, and the navbar is the one we'll be using, and we're going to place that above the router view. So let me do this, navbar, like so, and save it. So now let's take a look at this, and we can see at the top we have this navbar. Doesn't look great, but we have it right there, and we can go between these two different routes. Now I just want to apply some styles to these things, so let's go back to the navbar and paste in some styles. So for the header itself, we say display flex so that it all is on the same line going across. Justify content space between, so it puts space between this and this. So this will be on the left and this on the right. Then align items, this is for the vertical alignment, it's going to be in the center. Max width is 1200 pixels. Margin 0, top and bottom, auto, left and right, and a padding of 10 pixels all the way around. The H1 is going to be a lightish grey, the font size quite large, 48 pixels. The anchor tags, which remember are the router links, for those we colour them grey. Take away the text decoration, that's the underline, and a margin left for each one of 20 pixels. And then when we have the router link active class, when that link is active, we colour them a bit darker and we give them a font weight of bold. So if I save this now and preview, this looks a bit better. So we can see the active link when we click on it. So that's about it for the navbar. Next up, we'll take a look at how to use the router programmatically inside the setup function. So then, like I said before, we cannot use this $router inside this setup function because this doesn't have a value inside the setup function. It doesn't refer to the component itself, so we can't use this. So the way we work with the router programmatically when we're using the composition API inside setup is we first have to import something from the Vue router package. Now remember, we have the Vue router package installed. It's right here because when we used the Vue CLI to create a new project, we said we want to use the Vue router and it installed it for us. So first of all, I'm going to import something from the Vue router package. And the thing I want is a function called useRouter. Now this thing right here is a function which returns to us a router instance. So I can say const router is equal to useRouter, like so. So when we invoke that function, it returns to us an instance of the router which we're storing now inside this constant. And you can call this what you want, call it ABC if you want. Makes no sense, but the name doesn't matter. It's returning that router to us, and we can use the different methods on this router to do things now. And this is generally the pattern when we're working inside the setup function. We import different pieces that we need, whether that's things like ref or functions from the Vue router or our own functions like these composables we've created right here. We import them and then we use them inside the setup function. That's a pattern you're going to find yourself using quite a lot. Anyway, back to the router. I'm going to log this to the console to see what it looks like. Console.log router. Save that and come over here. I'm going to open up the console and we can see this thing right here now, and we can see all of these different methods on the router. So we can see this thing right here that we used before, the go method. So we could use that. I could down here say router.go and then pass in -1 to go back, or I could pass in just 1 to go forward. Now I'm not actually going to do that because we don't need to. We can also use the push method. If we take a look at this, we have the push method right here. So we could do that to redirect to another page. Now we're going to use this because when I type in a blog here, the title, the content and the tags, and hit add post, I then want to redirect to the home page after that post request is complete. So I'm going to use this router to do that. So we await that post request right here, and when it's done, we move on. And at that point, I want to say, okay, router.push to go to a new route, and we could say /, or we could use an object, and I'm going to use that to say that the name of the route is going to be the home route, and now it's going to redirect us there. So let's give this a whirl. I'm going to come over here and put in a title, any old rubbish, and any old rubbish for the content, tags, news, dev, and then let's scroll down and add the post. And now it redirects us to the home page, and we can see that interesting new post down here. All right, cool. So that's how we use the router inside the setup function. First we import useRouter, then we invoke that function to return the router to us, and then we can use different methods on that router to direct us to different pages. Alright then, so we've seen how we can use this function useRouter to create a router instance whereby we can redirect them, and we do that at the bottom down here after they submit the form. Now we can also import something else from Vue router, and that is useRoute, and that gets us information about the current route. So not the route itself, but the route that we're on. So I'm going to go to the details component to demo this. First of all, I'm going to import useRoute, and that's going to be from Vue router. Okay, so down here we can invoke this function inside the setup. I'm going to say const route is equal to useRoute, like this. And then I'm just going to log that to the console, like so. I'm going to save this and come over here to a details page, refresh, and open up the console over here so we can see this. And now we can see this object. And inside this, we can see the params, for example. We can also see other things like any query strings or the path. And we can get all of this information now from that route object. So right now, when we're saying get post, we pass through the ID from the props, but we can also get this from the route object. And the way we do that is by saying route .params.id. So I'm going to save that and I'm going to cross this off. I'm going to refresh and it should just work exactly the same way. It's only now we're getting the ID from the route object instead of from the props. Now, no one way is better than the other when it comes to this example, but sometimes you might not always have the ID on the props. For example, if the component is not a route and we don't have the ID as a prop, we could still get the current route using this and then get the ID from that. For example, if this was in a navbar or something like that. Okay, so just another way to get the route parameters by using this useRoute function. Alright then, so time for another challenge, and this is probably going to be the hardest challenge I've given you so far because there is a lot to do. So, this tag.view component right here, I've already created inside the views folder. And at the minute, it's just got an empty div in the template, nothing in the script except for these instructions and the empty component object and no styles. So this component is going to be used as a view when we go to the tag route. So in the future, if I was to click a tag, it would go to the tag route and we would show the tag component. And inside that component, we would show all of the blogs with that tag. So what I'd like you to do is, first of all, create a tag route. And inside that tag route, the tag will be a route parameter. So the route will look something like this. For example, if I clicked on news, it would go to /tags/news. So first of all, create this route inside the index router file. Then inside this tag component, make a request for all the posts. And you can use the getPosts composable to do that. Then use a computed property to return an array of all the posts which contain that current tag inside the route, so the route parameter tag. Then use the useRoute function to access the tag route parameter. So you can use that inside the computed property to filter the posts and return the posts only with that tag. Now we can use the post list component to output the required posts up here. So that's over here, the post list. All it needs is a prop, which is the post it's going to show. And that is going to be the filtered posts, which we create with this computed property. And finally, show the spinner on this page until the data is loaded and an error if there is one. So pause the video here, spend quite a while on this challenge because there's a lot to do, and give it a good go. If you're stuck and you want to see my solution, then press play again right now. So then the first thing I'm going to do is delete all this so it's not in my way, and then I'm going to create the routes for this page. Now before I do that, let me just type in here tag page, so if I land on the route I can see it's worked. I'm going to go to the router and then at the bottom create this route object. So the path this time, let me scoot down here, is going to be /tags/ then a route parameter which is also tag. So that's the changeable part of the route. The name of this is going to be tag, and then the component itself will be tag. Okay, that's all we need to do, but we do need to import tag up here. So let's duplicate this and change create to tag. All right, so let's give this a whirl in the browser. If I go to /tags/hello, then we see the tag page. Awesome. So the next thing I need to do is import a few things into this page. Now, I'm just going to paste those in because I don't think you want to watch me type them out. And all I'm doing is importing the spinner first of all. We're going to show that while the data is loading, and that's coming from inside components and the spinner file. The post list component, because that's what we're going to pass posts to, and also get posts, which is the composable we're going to use to get the posts. So then I'm going to start by creating a setup method inside our component object, and this is where we're going to fetch the data. So let me use this get posts composable right here. I'm going to say const, and we want to extract the posts, the error if there is one, and also the load function from get posts. All right, that's all we want to do. Remember, these are the three values returned to us inside this composable right here. So we're grabbing those first of all. Now after that, we want to load the data, right? That's what we need to do to start the fetch, and then eventually we will have all the posts inside this thing right here. Now we need to make a computed property to filter these posts and only return an array of posts which contain a certain tag. The tag that's in the route. So in our case, hello would be the tag. So the first thing we need to do is get that tag, and I said to use the route object or the use route function from the Vue router. So let me import that first. I'm going to say import, and we want use route from Vue-router. So now down here I'm going to say const route is equal to use route, like so. Okay, so now we have the route, and we can get the route parameters off that, including the tag, this thing right here. And we're going to use that inside our computed property to filter these posts. So let's create that computed property down here. I'm going to create a constant called posts with tag. So this will be an array of all the posts with this particular tag. It will be a computed property. Press enter on that to import it right here. And inside here, we're going to fire a function which returns an updated value. So we want to return posts.value because we need to use the value property on a ref. Remember, this is a ref. If we take a look and get posts, it's a ref. So we need to use the value property to get the actual value. Then I want to filter these. So I'm going to use the filter method, and inside I'm going to fire a function. Now remember, we return true if we keep the item in the array, false if we filter it out. Now we want to return true if that particular post that we're currently cycling through, and we take that in as a parameter. I'll call it P, but you can call it what you want. So if this P, that post, contains or includes the tag from the route, then we're going to keep it in. So what I'm going to say is p.tags to get the tags property from the post. Each post has a tags property, so that's what we're grabbing. And I'm going to say dot includes, and then in parentheses I'm going to say route, which is the route object we have right here, dot params to get the parameters, and then dot tag, which is the name of our route parameter for this route. So we're saying this is going to return a boolean, either true or false. It will return true if the tags of the current post we're iterating includes the tag which is in the route. So if that's the case, it returns true, and that stays in the array, in the filtered array, because we want to show that post. It includes the tag and we'll show it on the page. If it doesn't, then this is going to return false, and that post will be filtered out of the array. So when we return this filtered array, it won't be in it. Does that make sense? Okay, so now we want to return a few values at the bottom. So a return, and we're going to return an error if there is one, which is coming from here. We also want to return the posts, and we also want to return posts with tag. So let's go and do the template now. So let's get rid of this first of all. Don't want that. And instead, first of all, I want to check for an error. If there is an error, we'll output it. So we'll do a div tag first of all. And then inside that div, we want to output the error. But we only want to output this if there is an error. So v-if is equal to error. All right, so if there is a value for error, we'll output it. If not, we won't. Next, we want another div for the posts. So let's create that div and close it off. And then we want to check that we have posts. So I'll say posts dot length. Now remember, this starts off as an empty array inside get posts over here. So it doesn't have a length, and while it's an empty array, we won't show this then. Only when we do have posts, we will show this. So inside this, we want to output our filtered posts, these things right here, posts with tag. So I'm going to use our post list component right here. Remember, this expects to get a prop, which is the posts, and then it outputs all of those posts. So we can reuse this. That's the nice thing about creating components, they're reusable. So now inside this, I'm going to use the post list, and the posts prop is going to be equal to the posts with tag. That's all we need to do. We're passing in this filtered array of posts into the post list. Now, we imported it right here, but we've not registered it down here. So let's do that inside the components property, like so. And we want the post list. We also want to register, while we're here, the spinner component, which we import as well, because we're going to output that at the bottom. So we'll do that inside a div, which we'll close off first of all. And then inside here, we'll say v-else. So if this is true, then it's going to output this. If it's not, then it will output this, which is the spinner, while it's loading. So let's now place the spinner inside here, save this, and I think that's it. So I'm going to cross my fingers and hope this works without error. So let me come over here, and you can see at the minute there's no post showing, and that's because we're at /hello. Let me just go back to the home page, and let me try something with 2 posts. Coding, all right? So we'll do coding. So I'm going to go to /tags and then /coding. Press enter. And now we can see those 2 posts. That's all worked. So again, I know this was quite a hard challenge and there was a lot to do. So don't worry if you couldn't do this. But just have a look through it again. Notice everything we've done and make sure you understand it. We've fetched the post right here, and we've created a computed property to filter those posts based on the current route, and we've got that route object right here. We've returned that, and then we're just outputting them inside the post list. Okay then, so what I'd like to do now is make like a little tag cloud over on the right hand side of the page, which lists all of the different tags combined for all of our different blog posts. And if we click on one of those tags, it's going to take us to the tag view, where it lists all the blogs that contain that tag. So the first thing I want to do is create a component for this inside the components folder, and it will be called tag cloud.view. And inside here, I'm going to type out Vue and enter to boilerplate this. And we'll do a div, first of all, with a class of tag-cloud. And inside that, I'm going to do an h3 that says tags. And below that, we'll do a div. And that div will eventually contain all of the tags. So we need to cycle through a list of tags here and output each one as a link. But how do we get a list of all the different tags across all blogs? If we take a look at the data, then all of these right here, these are blog posts. So we can't pass that into this because then we're cycling through blog posts. We just want a list of tags. And also there's another problem. Some of the tags are duplicated. So we have, for example, coding here and coding here. We don't want that to appear twice in the list because then we're going to be cycling through it and outputting it twice in the tag cloud. So we want to eliminate all of the duplicates as well in our list of tags. So we're going to eventually create a composable to do this, but in order to get the tags, first we need the posts. Now I could use get posts to fetch all of those posts, but I'm not going to do that because this component will be nested inside the home component right here. So let's do that first of all. I'm going to say tag cloud, and all we're going to do then is pass in a prop called posts, where we pass in the posts because we get those posts inside the home component right here. So we don't need to get them again inside the tag cloud. We already have them and we can just pass them in. Now, in order to use this tag cloud component, we need to import it over here. So I'm going to duplicate this and change post list over here and here to tag cloud. And then I'm going to register it here as well, tag cloud. So if I save this, at the minute it's going to be right at the bottom. If I just refresh, we can't see anything there, and that's probably because we've not saved this. Let's save that file, and then at the bottom we can see tags, right? So we're going to list them all here. Eventually they'll be listed on the right once we add CSS, but for now let's just list them all here. So we can accept now the props in here, and that includes the posts. So we have those posts. Now we need to use those posts to create an array of all of the tags and eliminate as well any duplicate tags. So the way we're going to do that is by creating a composable function. You don't have to create a composable function. You could do it directly inside your component if you wish, but I like to externalize as much logic as I can, which might be reused in other places in the future. So I'm going to go to composables and create a composable called use tags and .js. Alright, so inside here we need to do a few things. So I'm just going to paste in these little notes. So first of all, we need to take in an array of posts into this function because we want to cycle through those posts to get all the tags. Then we want to create a new tag set, and a set is a special type of data in JavaScript that doesn't allow duplicates inside it. So if we try to add a duplicate, then it won't allow it. It's a bit like an array, but it just won't allow duplicates. Then we're going to add the tags to each of the posts to this tag set, right? And again, as we go through them, if we add, for example, the coding tag for blog post 1 and then go into blog post 2 and try to add the coding tag again, it's not going to allow that because it's a set. And then eventually what we're going to do is return an array of tags based on that set. So let's first of all import ref from the Vue library because we're going to use a ref value. And then I'm going to create the function use tags and set it equal to an arrow function. Okay, so inside this function we need to take in a post array, and we'll pass that in later. So the first thing I'll do is create a couple of refs. So the first one will be called tags, and that's equal to a ref, and it's going to start as an empty array, but ultimately it will be an array of all of the unique tags. Next, I'm going to create a tag set. So const tag set, and in fact this is not going to be a ref, this is just going to be a new set. We don't need it to be reactive, we're only going to use it inside this function to create this set. So now I want to cycle through the posts and add the tags of each post to this set. So I'm going to take the posts that we take in right here and use for each on that posts array. So for each cycles through the array and performs a function for each item in the array. And inside the function, we get access to each item. So each post in our case. Now, for that item, I want to get the tags and cycle through those as well. So I'm going to take the item, dot tags, because we have a tags property on each post. And then I'm going to use for each on this. So for each tag, we fire a function as well. So we're firing a function for each tag in the post, and we're firing a function for each post as well. So ultimately, we're getting all the tags here. So for each tag, what I'd like to do is take our tag set and try and add this tag. So the way we do that is say tag set, and then a method called add. That's how we add something to a set, and we're going to add the tag that we're currently iterating. So it's going to cycle through every single post, and then for each post it cycles through the tags and it tries to add this to the set, then this, goes on to the next post, gets the tags, adds this to the set, then this, etc. When it comes to a duplicate, it'll try to add it to the set, but it won't do. It won't allow it to add it. It will just move on because it already exists in the set, and sets cannot contain duplicates. So at the end of all this, we have a set with all of the tags, and there's no more than one instance of each tag. There's no duplicates inside that. Now, I don't want to return a set at the end of all this. I want to return an array. So what I'm going to do is turn this set into an array by saying tags.value. So that's this reference right here. We're updating the value, and we'll set that equal to an array. And then we're going to use spread syntax, which is ... on the tag set, like so. And what this does is get the tag set, and it takes all of the elements and spreads them out into this array. So now we no longer have a set, but we have all the individual elements from that set inside the array. And now we can return that. So let's do that at the bottom, return the tags inside an object. And now all we need to do is export this function at the bottom. So we'll say export default, and it's called use tags. Phew, so I know that was a bit of work, but now we have this composable, which is going to return to us an array of tags, which we can cycle through in our tag cloud component. So let's do that now. Let me come over here, and I want to now import that use tags composable. So I'll do that inside the script at the top over here. I'm going to say import, and it's called use tags from, and we want to come up a level outside of the components folder, then into composables, and then we want use tags. Okay, so we have that, and now we can use it inside the setup function over here. So I'm going to say const, and then I want to get the tags from this, so I'll destructure those, is equal to use tags. But remember, we have to pass in the post here, and we can get that from the props. Remember, we automatically get access to the props in the setup function. So right here, I can say props dot, not tags, posts, and I'm passing those in to the use tags composable. So it cycles through those, gets us all the tags in an array. Now I can return this tags array at the bottom of the setup function, so it's accessible in our template. And then I can cycle through the tags right here. So let's do that. I'm going to say v-4 is equal to tag in tags. Now this needs a key, so we'll bind to that using a colon. And each tag is unique, remember, because it was a set and we can't have duplicates. So we can just use the tag as the key. Now inside this div, I want to output the tag, but I also want it to be a link to the tag page for that tag. So I'm going to create a router link first of all, like so. And this is going to go to, and we'll use an object right here. It should be to, not TP. And the name of the route we want to go to is going to be tag. That was the name of the page. If we go to the route index, we can see right here, that was the name of the component, or rather the route. So that's the name. We also want to pass through a parameter. So we'll use params, and then the parameter is the tag. So again, that was the name of the parameter right here. So the tag is going to be whatever the tag is right here. So let me pass that in like so, and that's all there is to it. Now inside this link, I want to output the tag itself. So hash, and then double curly braces, and tag. Right then, so let me save that and check this out down here. And now we can see all of those tags, and there's no duplicates. And if we click on one of these, it goes to the tag page for that tag. Awesome. Let me refresh so I can see those. Let me choose dev, and we get this one right here. So they all work. Now it currently doesn't look great, so I'm going to add some styles to this now. Let me just copy them from my repo, so you don't have to watch me type them all out. Paste them in here. So we have the tag cloud, which is the div surrounding everything, and we just give that some padding. The h3 title inside, we give a border to the bottom, bit of padding, and a color of a deep gray. The div inside the tag cloud, which is this thing right here where we cycle through the tags, we say display inline block and padding 10 pixels. Any anchor tag, so any tag itself, a light grey colour, and we take away the underline, text decoration none, and then any active class, so the one that we click on becomes active when we go to that page. It gets this class automatically from the Vue router. We colour it this orange colour so we know it's active, and also make it bold. So if I save that and view this now, they look a bit better. If we click on one, and we can't see it right now because it's not at the bottom of this tags page. So let's put it there as well. I'm going to go to the tag view, and I want to import it first of all. So let me duplicate this one and change post list to tag cloud. So we're going to use it on the tag page as well here. We also want to register it here, tag cloud, and we also want to output it underneath this post list. So tag cloud, like so, and we need to pass in some posts as a prop. Remember, if we take a look at the tag cloud, it needs that posts prop so it can cycle through them and get the tags. So we pass those in because we already have access to the posts in this template. So posts is equal to posts, like so. And if I save this now and come down here on this page where the tag is news, we can see that news is highlighted. If we go to coding, coding is highlighted. So that's a lot better. There's just one more thing I want to do, and that is to display all of these not on the left but on the right instead. And to do that, we need to add one final bit of CSS. So this is going to be very, very simple to do. I'm going to go to the home page where we output the tag cloud, And this div right here, I'm going to give a class of layout. So this class will style down here. I'm going to paste in this style, and all this does is display that div as a grid, and that means that the elements inside them, this and this, are going to be side to side in this grid. Now all we need to do is specify the template columns. So we're saying the thing on the left, the first thing, which is the post list, that will take up 3 fractions of the width. And the thing on the right, the tag cloud, will take up 1 fraction of width. So it's like saying this is 3/4 of the page on the left, and this is 1/4 of the page on the right. Now the gap between each column is also going to be 20 pixels, so they're not right up to each other as well. So if I save this and come and go to the home page over here, first of all, then that looks a lot better. All right. So we also need to apply that layout class to the tag page over here. So I'll give this a class of layout as well. And I don't think we'll need to do the styles again down in this component, because remember, we've not scoped these styles right here, and that means they're applied site wide. So if I go to a tag page now and refresh, we see it on the right as well. So that looks a lot better. And so we've kind of made this blog now. We can list all of the blogs by tag only. And we can also create new posts and add those posts. So the next thing I want to do is introduce you to Firebase and Firestore databases, so that instead of storing all of our data inside a JSON file over here and using JSON server to get that data, instead we're getting all of our data from a database. Now, there is just one more CSS thing I want to do, because I just saw that when we go to a tag page, the content is going all the way across. I want to sit in a central column like the home page over here. So we need to add a style inside the tag component to do that. So it's this div right here that needs a style. And if I scroll down here, I can paste this in like so. And all we do is give it a max width of 1200 pixels now. Margin 0, top and bottom, auto left and right. That's what centralizes it. And a bit of padding. So if I save this now, this hopefully will look a bit better. Yep, it does. All right, so next up, Firebase. Now, we've seen in the last few chapters how to fetch external data from our Vue components, but so far we've only been using JSON files and JSON server to fetch data on our computer. And now we're going to switch that approach to something a bit more practical and useful, and that is to use a database instead. So to do that, we'll be using Firebase. And Firebase is what's known as a backend as a service, and it provides us with a collection of server-side tools like a database, an authentication service, file storage, and hosting. And we'll be looking at and using all of those over the next few chapters. And the benefit of using Firebase for all of these different features is that we don't have to worry then about setting up our own server to manage all of them. Firebase handles all of the heavy lifting and maintenance for us. So it's really easy to get a full web application up and running very quickly. Now, to begin with, we'll be using the database to store our project data in. The database provided to us by Firebase is called the Cloud Firestore right here. And it's a real-time database, meaning it sends data updates to our application in real time. And then we can show those without having to refresh the page. Now, we'll learn more about that later. For now, let's just set up a Firebase project. So the first thing you need to do is sign up for an account, probably using your Google accounts. And if you're not logged in, you should see a sign in button right here to do that. So click that, link your Google account or sign up for one for free. And then after you've done that, you'll see go to console right here. And I want you to click that. And this takes you to your Firebase console. So right here, you can see that I've already got some projects on the go. You won't have any of these to begin with, so click on Add Project, and we're going to create a name for our new project. I'm going to call mine Udemy Vue Firebase Sites, like so. But you can call it what you want. It doesn't really matter. And then I'm going to continue. I don't want to enable analytics for this project. Then I'm going to create the project. This will just take about 20 seconds or so. Alright, so once it's done that, click on the continue button down here, and that's going to take us to our project dashboard or our project overview. And all of the different features that we can use in Firebase are listed over here on the left. So to begin with, we want to set up the Cloud Firestore database. There is an older database called Real-Time Database. Don't get these two confused. We're not going to use that. We're going to use the newer Cloud Firestore, which is also a real-time database. So click Create Database, and this pop-up right here shows us the Firebase rules. Don't worry too much about those for now. We'll talk about them later. For now, I want to start in test mode, which means we'll be able to access all of our data from the front end without having to worry about these rules so much. So click on Next, and then choose a location. I'm going to keep this as the default. Click Enable, and this creates us our Cloud Firestore database. Alright then, so now that's done, we can see over here, this is where we would start a collection for our database, and then on the right later we'll see all of the different documents in those collections. So now we have our database created, we need to be able to connect to our Firebase backend, our Firebase project, from the Vue application. So we'll see how to do that in the next video. Okay then, so now we've set up Firebase on the back end and we have our Cloud Firestore created as well. We'd like to be able to communicate with this database and other Firebase services in the future from the front end, our Vue application. Now, in order to do this, there are two steps we need to take. The first step is to install a Firebase package locally using npm in our project. And that Firebase package comes along with a load of different methods that we can use to interact with services in Firebase, like the database or authentication in the future as well. The second step is to get a configuration object from the backend from our Firebase project and add that to our front-end project as well. And then the Firebase package on the front end will use that configuration object to connect to the correct project on the backend. Because if you think about it, there are going to be tons and tons of Firebase projects created by many different people across the world. And the Firebase package on the front end needs to know what project to connect to. So it uses that configuration object to do that. So the first step then, installing Firebase, which is a package we can install using npm. So we'll say npm install Firebase to do that, and make sure you're in the correct directory right here. So press enter to install that. Alright then, so now that's installed, head on over to package.json and check out the version that's installed. Now I'm using version 8, and it's important that you don't use anything less than this, like version 7 point something or other, because there were breaking changes from 7 to 8. So now that's installed, we can now get the configuration object from our Firebase backend. So to do that, head on over to the project overview and then click on this icon right here, and this is to register a web app for our Firebase backend. So if we click on this, it asks us for an app name. Now, the reason we have to create a web app for the backend is because if you think about it, a backend can have many different front ends. You could have numerous websites or mobile apps or games even that use the same backend, the same data. So for every front end that we have, we register a new app for the backend, and we can configure those differently then. So I'm going to call this one Dojo Blog, because that's the name of our blog. And then I'm not going to set up Firebase hosting, we'll look at that later, and then I'm going to register the app. And once this is done, it gives you a snippet which you could add into your project and just edit a little bit, but we're not going to do that. Instead, we'll continue to console. And then what we need to do is click this app that we've just added right here and click on the cog to go to the settings. And if we scroll down, we can see the snippet that we need right here. Now, I just want the config object, so I click config, and then I'm going to copy all of this. Now, you can do that by clicking this icon down here as well. So copy that, and then we need to add this to our project on the front end. So I'm going to come over here and I'm going to create a new folder inside source called Firebase. And then inside that, I'm going to create a file called config. So this is where all of our Firebase stuff is going to go, and all of our config and setup. So I'm going to paste in that object right here. And you can see we have an API key right here. And this is what the Firebase package we just installed on the front end uses to connect to the correct project. So this is a bit like an identifier for our project. Now, a lot of people worry and a lot of people ask me whether this is safe to have on the front end of a project because it basically exposes our API key. Well, don't worry too much about that because we'll be using Firebase security rules later on to protect our data, and also we can lock an API to a single domain so that only that domain can make requests to our Firebase project. Okay, so don't worry too much about that. Alright, so now we have our config object. The next thing we need to do is allow the Firebase package we installed to use this to set up our connection. So first of all, we need to import Firebase into this file. And the way we do that is by saying import Firebase from, and then it's Firebase/app. So when we installed the Firebase project, it went into Node modules, and this grabs the Firebase object from Firebase/app, the package we installed, which is inside Node modules. Now, this Firebase/app, this is the core Firebase package, or the core part of the Firebase package. And no matter what services we're using from Firebase, whether it be just the database or just authentication or a mixture of a few different things, we always have to import this thing right here. That is the core functionality, and this is the thing that we're going to use to set up the application or set up the connection to the backend. All right. Now, on top of that, we also have to import any features from Firebase that we want to use. In our case, we want to import the Firestore as well. So the way we do that is by saying import and then Firebase/Firestore. So once you've done that, we can then initialize our Firebase app by coming down here. I'm going to do a little comment to say init Firebase, and then we say Firebase, which is this thing we imported right here, and we use a method on that called initialize app, and we pass in as an argument the Firebase config that we have right here. So it uses that config then to initialize the connection to our Firebase backend. Now, the next thing we want to do is also initialize the Firestore service because it won't work automatically. We also need to create some kind of connection to that service. So let me do another comment to say init Firestore service, and then underneath that I'm going to say const, and I'm going to call it project Firestore and set it equal to Firebase.Firestore, like so. So this sets up a connection to the Firestore as well, and in the future, if we want to do any communication with the Firestore database, like add documents to collections or retrieve documents, then we can use this thing right here to do that. So now we have that, and by the way, this wouldn't work if we didn't import this thing right here. But now we have this, we also want to export this at the bottom so that in the future, if we want to use the Firebase in a particular component or any other file, we can import it from this file. So let's say at the bottom, export, and then we're going to export an object, and inside that, we'll just export project Firestore, like so. So that's pretty much it. We've now connected to our Firebase backend, and we can start to use this to interact with our database. Alright then, so before we dive into working with our Firestore database and using it in our project, I just want to take a few minutes to talk about how Firestore databases work, and in general how NoSQL databases work as well, which is what Firestore is. So, our Firestore database can contain at the top level different collections of data, and you can have as little or as many collections as you want, and each collection would store a specific type of data. For example, a blogs collection would store blog documents. A polls collection would store poll data. Authors, and books. That's pretty self-explanatory, right? So inside each collection, we would have a series of different documents, and all of these different documents would represent a single item, a single author in this case. Now, each document inside a collection has a unique identifier, a bit like this. And Firebase automatically assigns these different identifiers to the documents when we create them. And they're unique. So if we want to in the future fetch a particular document, we might use this ID to fetch it. Now each document looks a bit like a JavaScript object, and it has key value pairs. So for example, this document right here would have a name, an age, a genre, and also a books property, and that could be an array. So you can store booleans, strings, timestamps, arrays, etc., all kinds of data inside our different documents. And generally speaking, all of the documents inside a single collection would have a pretty similar structure, because obviously all of those documents represent the same thing, in this case, authors. So that's Firestore databases at a glance. Now let's try creating a collection and a couple of different documents inside our database. So let's start by creating our first collection inside the Cloud Firestore. So we do that by clicking on Start Collection. This collection ID is just a name for the collection, and it would describe what type of data is going inside. Since we're making a blog website, I'm going to call this Posts, and then click on Next. Now it asks us to create the first document inside this collection. Now this thing right here is the document ID, which remember I said every document has, and it must be unique. Now we could enter in our own ID here if you want to, but I always use the auto-generated one from Firebase, and that creates us a unique ID. So inside these documents we have different key and value pairs. Now each key is basically called a field in Firestore databases. So we can create a field, for example, called title, and that would be the title of the blog in our case. The type right here is the data type, and you can use all of these different data types for our fields. This is going to be a string, and then the value is the name of the blog, or the title of the blog in our case. So I'm going to say welcome to the new blog, like so. So that's the first value. Now we can add another field by clicking on this right here. So I could say now the body, and this is also a string, and I'm just going to paste in a load of lorem ipsum right here. So that's the second field. The third one is going to be the tags, and this is going to be an array, and we can see we have different values, and each value can be a different data type in itself. Now each value in our case is a string. The first one is going to be web dev right here. We'll add a new field which is also a string, and we'll say coding, and then we'll add one more, and that will be news. And that is the document created right here. So let's save it, and we should see now a posts collection. Then here will be a list of the documents. At the minute we just have one, and this is the ID of that document, and this is the document details over here. So we have a body, the tags, and also a title. Now you can update these by clicking on the fields, and you can also delete different fields. You can also delete the document by clicking on these three little circles over here and go to delete document, and we can add new documents by clicking on this. This will pop up this window again. And you can also delete the collection by clicking on this icon right here and going to delete collection. So that's how we create collections and documents from Firestore. What I'm going to do now is create a new document, but I'm not going to film it because we've already seen exactly how to do this. And then next up, we'll see how to interact with the database so we can retrieve these documents and show them on our website. Okay then, so I'm currently inside the getPosts composable function that we created, and at the minute this fetches the data from this endpoint using the fetch API and this JSON server endpoint, and that gets us all of the data from this db.json file. But we don't want to use this anymore. Instead, we want to grab data from our Firestore database. So you can see I've added on an extra document, so we want to grab both of these from the Firestore database and show those in the browser instead. So I'm going to get rid of all of this stuff right here inside the try block, and we're going to replace it with code which will go out and grab the data from the Firestore database instead. Now the first thing we need to do is import this project Firestore right here from this config file, because we need that to interact with the database. So let's do that at the top of the file. I'm going to say import, and then we want project Firestore from, and we come up a level outside of the composables folder, so // then into the Firebase folder, then /config. So now we can use this to connect to our database and grab the data. So the way we do it is by first of all creating a constant called res. You don't have to call it this, but this is just to restore the response, which is why I've called it res. And I'm going to set that equal to project firestore, and we use a method called collection. Now, this method connects us to a specific collection in our database. In our case, we want to connect to the posts collection right here. So we just pass the name of the collection we want to connect to into this method, so posts. And this creates a connection to that collection. It creates a reference to it, if you like, but it doesn't actually get the data from inside it. The way we do that is by tacking on a get method. So this grabs us all of the data and it returns it to us, but it's asynchronous. So it's going to take some time to do. And because of that, we place a wait in front of it. So we wait here now until this is all done. And then when it's done, we store the response inside this constant. Now that response is going to be an object. It's not the data directly. So let's take a look at that. Console.log response. I'm going to save this and head to the browser. And I'm going to open up the console. And inside the console, I'm going to just refresh. And right here, we can see this response object. And it looks like a load of random characters right here. And most of this we don't need. The thing that we're interested in is the docs property right here. That contains the documents. So if I say response.docs here instead, save that and refresh, then we'll see the docs object instead. And we can see there's two items inside it. So each of these items represents a single document inside this collection. Now, in order to get the data from each document, we need to use the data method, which is right here. So, and by the way, we can also see the ID property right here. So if we need the ID of the document in the future, we can use that ID property on each document. And that ID matches to whatever the ID was generated right here. So let's now try and grab the data for each document and update this stuff right here with that data. So essentially what we need to do is cycle through those documents, and for each of those documents get the data and add it to this array. So the way we're going to do this is by using the map method in JavaScript. Now just very quickly, what the map method allows us to do is take an array and cycle through the array, perform a function on each item whereby we do something with that item and return it, and then output a new array based on the old one. So for example, we have this array right here, 20, 30 and 50. We use map to cycle through it. We fire this function on each of them whereby we return the item -5. Whatever we return right here for each item is passed into the new array, and so this is the new one based on the old one. So this is the method, the map method, we're going to use on the response array that we get back from Firestore, the two documents in our case. So then what I want to do is use the map method on the response documents that we get back. So that was response.docs, remember? That was an array of document objects. And for each document, I want to extract the data for that document and add it to the new array. And then that new array is eventually going to be assigned to this ref right here. So let's first of all say post.value, because that's how we update the value of a ref right here. And then we set that equal to response, which is this object we get back, .docs, which was the document array, and then we're going to use the map method on that. So remember, this returns a new array based on the old one right here, and that new array is going to be then assigned to this. So this fires a function for each document inside this array, and each time we get access to that document as an argument. So we'll say doc and take that into the callback function. Now, I want to return a value based on this doc that is eventually going to be added to the new array and stored inside here. Before I do that though, let me just console.log the doc and then .data, which is the method we saw on that document before, and this method extracts the data from that document, so the stuff actually inside the document right here. So let me save this and come to the browser, and we see an error, but don't worry too much about that for now. If we scroll up, we can see these two documents. So these are the data from each of the documents, and these are basically the objects that we want to add to the array, the new array that will eventually be stored in posts right here. Now, there's one problem with this. There's no ID property inside this thing right here, and we use the ID when we output the posts. If we go to the components and go to post list, we can see the key is the post ID. So we need the ID property on each post, but it's not there inside the document. It's not in the document, but it's on the document. And remember, before I said we can access the ID of each document as well using the ID property. So on each item that we return here, we want all of the data, but also the document ID. So let's do this. We need to return a value, and I'm going to return an object. So each post is an object. And what I'm going to do is use spread syntax, so 3 dots and then doc.data. So what that does is grab all of the different properties right here that we saw a minute ago, all of these things, these 3 things, and it spreads them as properties and values into this new object. That's what this does right here. Then on top of that, we want another property, which is the ID property, which is then used in here. And that ID is going to be from this document. And the way we get it is by saying doc.id. So now this object right here will contain all of the data and an ID property. So it will look like this, but it will also contain the ID, which remember is this thing right here. And that ID will then be used as the key as we output each post. Hope that makes sense. So now post.value is this new array of posts where each post looks like this. So let's save this and give this a whirl. I'm going to come over here and refresh. And now we can see both of those blogs right here on the homepage. So this has worked. So we've used Project Firestore to connect to a collection. We've got those documents. We've cycled through those documents right here on the response object, and we've mapped them to a new array whereby each item in that array represents a single post. It contains the data from that document and also the ID as well. So we update post.value to be that new array, and then inside the post list, we're outputting them right here. Now, we use the get posts composable inside the home component right here, and nothing needs to change right here, which is great because all we're doing is invoking this function and getting these things back from the function, and none of that's changed. We still return all of the same things. We've just changed the logic right here, how we actually get the data. So that's pretty much it in terms of getting all of the collection. But what if we want to get just one single document? For example, what would we do in this composable? Get post, where we have an ID and we just want to get that one document from the collection. We'll see that next. So now we know how to get a full collection of documents by using the Project Firestore, the collection method, saying what collection we want, and then using the get method. And then eventually what we do is return a new array of posts, which is assigned to post.value by using the map method. And remember, we use the data method on each document to get the data of that document, and we have access to the ID property of each document as well that we get back here. Now, what if we want to get a single document? For example, if I was to click on one of these, it would go to the details page, and then we want to fetch that single document. How do we do that? Well, first of all, let's open up get post, which is where we make this request. And currently, again, we're using JSON server to this endpoint, and we have access to the ID. Now, we're also going to have access to the Firebase ID right here when this is called, because if we take a look inside details, that ID is coming from the route parameter. And if we take a look at single post, then we can see this route parameter right here, and we say post.id. And that ID is available on the post because we add it onto each post object right here. So that ID now represents a Firebase document ID. And we're going to see in the address bar, if we click on one of these, You see, right here. So we have access to that ID and it's being passed into get post currently. So we can use that to get that single document with that ID from Firebase. Now to do that, let's first of all get rid of all this. I'm going to create a variable called res for response again, set that equal to await, and then again we're going to use the project Firestore, which I'm going to press enter on and it will auto import for me. And then I'm going to say .collection, and we want to again go into the posts collection, and then from there we need to get, oops, don't know where that's come from. From there we need to get a single document, and to do that we say .doc, and we pass in the ID of the document we want to get, which we have access to. So that will go out and get a reference to that single document, and then we can use the get method to get that document. So the document object that is returned to us right here, we'll see that in the console, contains all of the data, but again we need to use the data method in order to get that. Let me show you this. I'm going to come over here and I'm going to refresh on this page, open up the console, and we can see this thing right here. This is the document object we get back, the response object. And we can see if you go into Proto, the data method right here. That's the method we need to use to get the data of that document. So if I was to say response.data like so, then we should see down here, this is the data inside the document, right? And again, up here, we have access to the ID on the document response. So this thing right here has an ID property, which we can use as well, because we'll need that. So what I want to do is update the value of this post ref with the data that we have and the ID property on this object. So let's do that. I'm first of all going to say post.value is equal to, and then a new object. And inside here, we want to use the spread syntax again to say response.data to get all of the data, the title, the body, and the tags. But also we want another property called ID, and that is the response.id. So this property right here. And again, now we have an object which represents the post. It contains all the data and the ID of the post as well. Okay, so that's pretty much it. Let's just now console.log post.value right here so we can see this object. I'm going to save it and refresh, and now we can see this whole object right here. And if we take a look at the target, you can see it's got a body, ID, tags, and title, and we can see the content on the page now. So we're returning this post right here, and then in the details page we get that post and we just output the different properties on that post. None of this needs to change. It's all the same. We're using the same property names. It's just that now our data is coming from Firebase. We're returning the same post object, so nothing in the view actually changes, just inside this function. Okay, so what if we try to pass in an ID that doesn't exist? For example, if I go to some random ID that doesn't exist, then obviously we're not going to see that post, and we get this weird object back with just an ID property right here. So instead what we want to do is throw an error, and then we can output that error inside details right here, okay, to say something like that post does not exist. Well, let me first console.log the response object, because I want to show you something. If I come over here and open up the response object, which is this one, we see this property exists. And if I open this, we can see that this is false for this random ID that I just entered. Now, if we go to an actual blog page that does exist, we can see if we open this up again, exists is true. So if this is true, it means that document exists. If it's false, it means it doesn't. So if it's false, we can throw an error. So let's do that right here. I'm going to say if, and then response.exists. Now I want to only fire code if it doesn't exist. So I need to reverse this. So this is basically saying if the response does not exist, if that document doesn't exist in the database, then we're going to throw an error. So we'll say throw error to do this. And then inside that, the message will be that post does not exist. Okay, so if I save this now and come back over here, I'm going to get rid of this and I'm going to go to another random ID that doesn't exist, press enter, and we can see now that that post does not exist. This message right here. Okay then, so we've seen how to retrieve single documents and a full collection of documents as well, which we can see on the home page. But what about adding new documents? Because at the minute, if we try to create a post, then this is still hooked to the JSON server endpoint. So if we go into the create view, which is where we do all of this logic, what we do is create a post object, first of all, with the title, body, and tags. And then we make a post fetch request to this JSON server endpoint. Now, we don't want to do this anymore. Instead, we want to post that data to our Firebase database, so it's added into this collection right here. So how do we do this? Well, it's actually really, really simple. All I'm going to do is create a response object, first of all, and set it equal to a weight. And then I'm going to say project Firestore and hit enter, so it imports it up here for us. Make sure you have that imported. And then I'm going to use the collection method again, and you'll find yourself using this collection method a lot to go into the collection of documents that we want. And then we want the posts collection. And now all we do is use a method called add, and this adds a document. Now what we need to do is pass in an object into this method that represents that object. In our case, that's this post object right here. So all we need to do is pass that in, and this creates a new document for us and adds it to this posts collection. And also the good thing is that when Firebase receives this message to add a new post document, it also generates the ID for us, so we don't need to worry about it at all. So I'm just going to log this response to the console so we can see this in action. Console.log, and then we want to log the response object. Make sure you open up your parentheses instead of putting a 9. And I'm going to comment this out so we don't get redirected to another page. So I'm going to save this now and just view this in a browser. So if we go to create, add in a lot of rubbish, doesn't really matter what it is, and then we'll say web dev for the tag, hit enter, add the post. Then if we open up and view the console, we can see now we get this response. This is the response object right here. And if we take a look at this, we can see the ID of the document that was just created. This was auto-generated, this ID for us by Firebase. And if we take a look over here, now we can see 3 documents. And this is the new one down here. And we can see the tags, the title, and the body. So how simple was that? All we needed to do was access the collection and then use the add method to add a new post, where this post is an object with the different data properties we want inside that document. And that's all there is to it. Now, we don't actually need to do anything with the response. I just wanted to show you that. Instead, what we want to do is redirect when this is done. Remember, we wait for this asynchronous task to complete before we move on. When it's done, we can redirect. So now if we take a look over here, and I'm just going to enter in a load of junk again and hit enter right here, add the post, then it redirects us to the home page. And we can see all of the new data right here, including the tags, because now it's just coming from a different source. So all of our Vue components and Vue logic still works exactly the same. It's only the retrieving and adding of data that's changed that logic. And fortunately, we separated that out from all of our components inside these composables. And that's another great thing about making reusable composable functions and the composition API. It just makes it so much easier to update your applications. Now, so far we've seen how to get documents, either a collection or a single document from Firebase. We've also seen how to add new documents as well. What about deleting documents? So what I'd like to do is, on the details page for a particular blog, is add a button, maybe at the bottom, and then when we click on that button, it deletes that post from Firebase and then maybe redirects us to the home page. So let's give that a whirl. I'm going to go to the details component first of all to do this, and then I'm going to add a button below the paragraph tag right here that we can click to delete this particular post. So let me create that first of all, and then inside that I'll just say delete post, and then I want to attach a click event to this, so at click, and set it equal to a function which I'm going to call handle click. So let's create that function down here. So I'm going to say const handle click is equal to a function, and this is going to be an asynchronous function because we'll use the await keyword inside it because we're going to be dealing with an asynchronous task. Now inside here I'm going to say await, and I don't need to store the results, or rather the response, in a constant. We're not going to do anything with that, so I'm not assigning the return value of this to anything. All I'm going to say is await and then project firestore, press enter on that to auto import it, and then we use the method .collection, and we want to go into the posts collection. Now first of all, we want to get a reference to a specific document. So to do that, we can say .doc, and we need the ID of that document. Now remember, we have that ID. We have it right here on the props. We can say props.id, or we can use the route parameters.id. But I'm going to use the props because it's a little shorter. And remember, we can use it from the props because if we go into our router file over here and take a look at the details component right here, we set props to true, and that means that any route parameter we pass in to the components we can accept on the props. So I'm going to say right here props.id, and we can get that then. So that is the route parameter ID, this thing up here. So we have a reference now to that particular document, and now what we need to do is just use the delete method on it like so, and that's all there is to it. Now it will go out to Firebase and delete this record or document with the ID from the database. Okay, so sometimes what I like to do is format this a little bit differently because it can get quite long with many different methods being chained together. So after the collection, sometimes what I do is just enter this onto a new line like this, and any new method just enter down as well. It becomes a little bit more readable. Okay, so after we've done this, what do we want to do? Because then that post won't exist and we don't want them to be on that page anymore. Well, we want to redirect them then to the home page. So remember, we wait for this to be done because we use the await keyword. When it's done, we can then take the router object that we have. No, we don't actually have that. We need to get the router object. So let me say up here, const router is equal to use router like this, and invoke that, and that auto imported it for me right here. So we get the router object. Now we can use that to say .push, and we're just going to go to /, which is the home page. And again, we could use an object right here instead if we wanted to say that the name of the route is home. Does the same thing. Still going to redirect to the home page. Let's give this a whirl. I'm first of all going to center this. Let me come down to the bottom and just paste in a style. So button.delete, so it needs a class of delete, and then we apply margin auto left and right so it centralizes on the page. I need to give this now a class of delete, so class is equal to delete so it can be styled. Save this, and now it's in the middle. So if we delete this, welcome to the new blog. And in fact, no, I don't want to delete that one. I'll delete one of the junky ones. So this one's over here, and we'll delete that post, and hopefully it should make that delete and then redirect us, but there seems to be an error. Okay, so let's go up. Cannot read property apply of undefined. Up here we have this warning right here. And I realized when I was looking for the error that I hadn't returned handle click inside this setup function, which is a schoolboy error. You always need to remember to return that right here. So let's do that. I'm going to click save now, close this and refresh over here. Then I'm going to delete the post, and now it's worked. And we can see that now it's no longer on this home screen. If I click on this one and try to delete this, it deletes that one as well. Awesome. So now we've seen how to get documents, how to add documents, and also how to delete documents. But what about ordering our documents, maybe by a created at date or using timestamps? We'll see how to do that next. So currently, when we're listing our blogs right here, they don't seem to be in any order. Now that's not technically true. They are in a weird kind of order, and the order is by the ID right here, so that's what they're ordered by, but that doesn't really mean much to a user. I'd like to make it eventually so that they're ordered by time and date, so that the newest shows first. So what we need to do in order to achieve this is delete these documents as they currently are, because they have nothing inside them that says when they were created, and Firebase doesn't provide us some magical way to know when a document is created. We need to add a created app property inside our documents when we create them, when we add new documents over here, so that it's stored inside the documents, and then we can use that created app field to eventually order the documents when we retrieve them. So we're going to have to delete both of these documents to begin with, so that we can start afresh, and every document will have a created app property which we can order by. So let's do that. I'm going to go over to this icon and say delete collection, and we do that to delete the entire collection and all the documents inside it. So what I'm going to do is just confirm this by typing in the name of the collection, and it asks you to do this so you're not deleting them accidentally. Then delete, and now we have no collection. Now, it doesn't matter, by the way, that we don't have a collection, but that we're trying to reference it over here on the create view to add a new post. That doesn't matter, because if we send a request to add a new post and that collection doesn't exist, then Firestore will look at this and say, well, never mind, I'll create it for you. And it does that, which is nice. So what we want to do now is whenever we create a new post, we want to add on a created app property to the post, so that in the future we can order by that created app property. Now, this created app property is going to be a timestamp, and what we need to do is use a special Firebase data type to create this timestamp, because that's how Firebase stores timestamps. They don't just use a date object or anything like that. They use a special value called a timestamp. Now, this value, let me show you over here, if I just generate any collection, is this thing down here, timestamp. This is what's known as a field value. So what I'm going to do first of all is head to the config file where we configure our Firebase, and then I'm going to make a reference to this timestamp, this special Firestore data type, so that we can use it in components later on if we export it at the bottom. So let's do this. I'm going to come down here and say const timestamp, and you can call this what you want, by the way. You don't have to call it timestamp, but I'm just calling it that, and set it equal to firebase.firestore.field value. Remember, those things I showed you in the drop down over there were field values, and then we want the server timestamp. So that is a special Firebase data type which represents a timestamp. And now if we want to create a timestamp, we just invoke this function, because this returns a function. It's stored in here, and we just invoke that function every time we want to create a timestamp. That's all we do. So now I'm going to export this function down here so we can import it inside the create view and use it. Now I'm going to make a created at property right here and set it equal to timestamp. I'm going to press enter on that and invoke it. And when I pressed enter on that, it should have automatically imported it for me from this file. So now this will have a created app property, every new document that we create, and that will be stored, that timestamp, in the document. And so in the future we can order by the time that the document was created. So let me save that. I'm going to come over here and I'm going to refresh the page, and I will choose any old title. We'll just say how to learn JavaScript. I'm going to paste in a load of lorem ipsum and then add some tags: web dev, JS, coding, add the post. Let's add a few more as well. So title, top, CSS tips, and then paste in the lorem ipsum, CSS, web dev, and coding. And then finally, we will create one more post, and this will be welcome to the new blog. Paste in the lorem ipsum, and we'll say news and coding, add post. And now we have 3 posts, but again, they're not in order. It doesn't matter that we've added the created app property. We're still not saying to Firebase we want to order them yet. We're just adding this property to the object, and so it's not yet ordered them by date or timestamp or anything like that. So let's take a look in our database. You'll have to refresh this to see the new collection again, which was automatically created for us, and these 3 documents. And now we can see this created app property right here in each of them, and it has this timestamp value. All right. So now we have that in each of these documents. We can start to order each document as we show them by that timestamp. So now we have this created app property on each one of the different documents. How about we try to order these blogs on the screen so that the newest one is first? Now this one right here, this is the last blog I created, so it should be the newest and it should show at the top. So how do we order these then? Well, it's really simple to do. All we need to do is go to where we're getting the posts inside Get Posts, and right here before get and after the collection, we need to just add on one method. Now I'm going down to the next line so it's a bit more readable and we can chain these methods together still. And I'm going to use a method called order by. And all we need to do is pass in here what we want to order by, what property. For example, if I pass in the title right here, then it will order them by the title property, which is this thing right here, and it will do that alphabetically. So if I save this and go back to the browser, we can see that now the titles are in alphabetical order. So if I want to change the order so that the W shows first and the H last, then I can just change this right here, a second argument, to descending. So the default order is ascending, but I can specify descending as a second argument if I want to. And now if I save that and come over here, we see the W first and the H last. Now, I don't want to order by title, I want to order by created at. Now, if I save this and save it, well, welcome to the new blog now is first. And that was the last one that we created. Then top CSS and then how to learn JavaScript, which was the first one we created. So this is the oldest and this is the newest. And I can demonstrate that by going to the timestamps, and we see this one right here, which is called, where's the title? Top CSS Tricks. That was 70508. This one was 70521, so newer, and that's welcome to the new blog. And the oldest one was 704, which is how to learn JavaScript. So now they are in date time order, which is nice. So to order them by time, we say order by, then the created app property, and we want it in descending order, meaning the newest will go first. Alright then, so we've pretty much finished this blog. We have now hooked it up to Firebase so that we're storing all the data in Firebase. We're retrieving it all. We can add new data and we can delete it as well. Now there's one more thing I want to show you to do with Firestore before we move on to the next chapter, and that is real-time data. Now we're just going to touch on this. We're not going to implement it fully, but I want you to understand it so that in the future, when we do implement it into our projects, it's not completely brand new to you. So then, imagine we have 2 people on the blog in different parts of the world on their computer, and that's these 2 browsers right here. So one person is adding a new blog and the other person is viewing the blog homepage. Now, if this person adds the post, then they see the new post right there, but the person over here viewing the homepage doesn't, because we don't have real-time data set up with our Firebase Firestore database. Now, one of the best things about Firestore databases is their ability to allow us to use real-time data so that if data in the database changes, like it has done right here, it will automatically update over here in this other person's browser without them having to refresh or anything. So they see new data immediately as it's been added. And the same would be true for any data that's deleted. If I was to go and delete a blog post, then it would disappear then from this page as well because of that real-time data hookup. So I want to briefly show you how to set up this real-time data, and then in the future we'll use it much more in our other projects. So to demonstrate this, I'm first of all going to create a new view inside the views folder, and I'm going to call this realtime.view. So I'm not actually implementing this into our project because that would take much longer to do and explain. And I want to start from a blank canvas so it is easy to explain and digest as well. So let's just boilerplate this. I'm going to just say H1 here, and inside the H1, we'll say real-time data. Now I'm going to hook this up inside our router index file down here. So let's do another route object. The path this time is going to be / real time, and then the name is going to be real time, and then the component is going to be real time. Okay, so now we need to import that up here. So let's do that. I'm going to duplicate this create one and replace create with real time. And let's just test out this route by going to / real time, like so. And now we can see this component. So then let's set up this real-time listener so we can get some real-time data in this component. The first thing I'm going to do is a setup function. And inside here, I want a ref to store all of the posts that we will get from the database. So I'll say const posts is going to be equal to a ref. Press enter on that to auto import it at the top. And the initial value of this will be an empty array. Now, eventually we'll populate this array with the data we get back from the database. Now we want to get a reference on the posts collection because we want real-time updates from that specific collection. So I'm going to say project firestore.collection and then say posts. And now I want to order these by created at. So I'll say order by, and it's going to be created at and in descending order like so. So now we have this reference to the collection, and the collection is sorted by the created at property. Now, previously we used at this point the get method to go out and get all of those documents in date order. But the problem with this is it only fetches it once, and then if the data updates, it doesn't perform another request to get the data again to reflect that updated data. It just does it once. And if we wanted to see the updated data, we'd have to refresh the page so that this runs again and it performs that get request again to get the data. Now, instead of that, we're going to use a method called onSnapshot like so. And this is how we set up a real-time listener to a Firestore collection. Now, this method fires a callback function every time we get what's known as a snapshot back from the Firestore collection. Now, a snapshot is basically just that. It's a snapshot of what the collection looks like at any given time. And it includes all the collection documents and the changes made to them, the number of documents in the collection, etc. Now, when we first connect to the collection using this method right here, Firebase takes an initial snapshot of that collection and it sends it back to us. And that's the point at which we first fire this callback function right here. So when we first connect to the collection, we get that initial snapshot, and we can take in that snapshot as an argument right here. So that comes from the Firestore database. Now, Firestore also takes a snapshot of the collection every time there is a change in it, whether that be a document added, removed, or updated, and then it sends us that snapshot too. And again, we fire this callback function and we take the snapshot as an argument. This is how a Firestore real-time listener works. We connect to a collection and listen for snapshots being sent to us using this method. One snapshot initially when we first connect to it using this method, and then another snapshot every time there is a change in that collection. And every time we get a snapshot back, we fire this callback function which has access to that snapshot. Now, this snapshot that we get back is an object, and it contains all the documents in the collection at that point in time, and any changes that were just made before the snapshot was taken, and other information too, like the current number of documents in the collection, or whether the collection is empty or not. So let's take a little look at this snapshot in the console. I'm going to say console.log and just output this snap. So now let's take a look at this in the console. If I open this up and I'm just going to refresh over here, we can see now that we get this snapshot over here. So this object tells us about the collection at that moment in time. This initial snapshot is when we first connect to the collection. And down here we can see that we have the docs array, which is all the documents inside the collection. We also have the empty property, which tells us is the collection empty, false in this case. The size of the collection, how many documents are inside it, and inside the proto we have the different methods as well. There's one to find out the document changes called doc changes. We can use for each to cycle through them, etc. So now I also said we got a snapshot every time there was an update in the data. So this is the initial snapshot right here, but what about if we update the data? Well, first of all, let me just refresh again to get that initial snapshot there. And then if I bring the data way over here and just make a quick change to this. So instead of guides, it's going to be guide, update that and head back over here. We can see now we have another snapshot. And down here, again, docs are 4, empty, false. But this time, the documents will represent the updated data, including that change that we just made. So now, if you think about it, we can do something with that snapshot every time we get it. We can output all of the updated changes to the template. So let's do that then. First of all, though, we need to update this ref right here with the value of the posts that we get in each snapshot. So initially and every time there's a change. So what I'm going to do is say let docs equal to snap, which is the snapshot object that we get back inside the function, dot docs. Remember, that gets us an array of all the documents. And what I want to do is map this into a new array. So I'm going to use the map function, which fires a callback function for each document. And in that callback function, we get access to the document we're currently iterating. So let's fire this function, and we want to return an object which is going to be placed inside this array. So let's do that, return, and this object is going to contain all of the document data. Now remember, we get that from a document by using the data function. We saw that in previous videos. So let me use the spread syntax, ... to say doc.data, and that will take all of the data from the document and spread it out into this new object. And also we want the ID, and that's on the document directly, remember? So we can say down here, doc.id. So now we have a new object for every document which contains all of the data and the ID as well. So what I'd like to do is take that docs right there and assign that value to the posts ref over here. So let's do that. We'll say after this map method is complete, posts.value is equal to docs, which is this thing right here, this new mapped array. And in fact, let's just log that to the console as well. So I'm going to say console.log, and I will say documents, and then output the docs. Okay, so let me preview this. I'm going to save it and refresh, and I'm going to open up the console. And now we can see the documents is this array of objects where each object is a post. And it has the body created at, the ID, the tags, and the title. So that's all we need now to output all of that data to the screen. So let us now return this posts reference at the bottom down here. So let's go to the bottom and say return, and we want to return the posts. So now we can cycle through that array of posts and output a template for each one of them. So I'm going to create a div first of all. Let's close that off, and then I'm going to use v4 on this div and set that equal to, and we'll say post in posts. We also need to bind the key property to this, and the key is going to be the post ID. Now inside this, all I'm going to do is output the post title. So I'll do another div, close that off, and then output the post.title for each one. So if I save this, we can see all of the titles right there. Now watch this. What I'm going to do is create a new post. So let me open this up in a new tab, and if I say test and then just do blah here, and then we'll do test for the tags, we're going to add this post, and then automatically we'll see that update over here even though we're not going to refresh the page. So add post and then come over here, and we can see now test has appeared in real time. We didn't need to refresh this other tab. Okay, now it's probably going to look better if I do this in split screen. So let me show you that. So again, I've got two screens up, one with the real-time route and one with the create route. And I'm just going to create this. And as I click add post, watch over here for that new title appear in real time. So add post, and we see it right here. So that's awesome, right? Now, if a user is on the blog and there's a change in data, they would get maybe a real-time update over here. Now, like I said, I'm not going to hook this up to our actual blog homepage over here, but now we know about real-time data in Firestore. I'm going to use it in the next chapter where we'll be building a live chat room. Alright then gang, so now we know all about Firestore databases and how to implement real-time data. We're going to put all of that knowledge to good use to create a new project which will be a live chat room. So this live chat room is also going to be using an authentication system, and we'll be using Firebase authentication to do this. So a user can sign up or log in. I'm going to log in with a user I've already created, which is me at thenetninja.co.uk. and a super strong password of test1234. I'm going to log in, and then we see all of these messages inside the chat room right here. We can see who we're logged in as. We can log out at the top, and at the bottom I can type messages which will then appear in real time inside the chat room as well, and we can see when that message was sent. So this is what we're going to be building in this project. So like any project that we create, I just want to go through the project structure first and the different components that we're going to be using so that we've got a bird's eye view of what the project is going to look like before we dive into the code. So as always, we'll be starting with our root component app.vue, and we'll be nesting the router view inside there as well, which is going to show one of two different components dependent on the route. If we go to just /, we'll show a welcome screen, and if we go to /chat room, we'll show the chat room. Now, in the welcome screen, we're going to show two different forms, the login form and the sign up form, and the user can switch between those two forms by clicking on a link. Once a user is authenticated, we'll redirect them to the chat room, and inside that we will have two different components, the chat window, which is where all of the chat messages will display in real time, and the new chat form, which is at the bottom, and that's where a user adds a new chat. We will also have a nav bar at the top which will contain a sign out button and also show who the current user is, who is logged in. So that's a bird's eye view of the project. Now let's set it up. So first of all, open up your terminal, and then we'll say Vue create, and we'll call this live-chat. Now we want to manually select features, and we also want to use the Vue router, so let's select that. And I'm going to uncheck the linter and formatter. Then I'm going to press enter. We want to use Vue 3, so let's press that. And then we want yes for this, for history mode. And then we want dedicated config files, and I'm going to press no for that. Okay, so now that's created, let's cd into the project directory, live-chat, and then I'm going to open this up in Visual Studio Code by saying code space full stop and press enter. So this right here is our starter project. So the first thing I'm going to do is just tidy up some of the boilerplate code that we have. I'm going to delete the hello world component, we don't need that. I'm also going to go into app.vue and delete the nav right here in the template. I'll delete all of these styles right here as well. We don't need those. And we just have the router view now. So I'll save that. I'm going to now go into views and delete both of these, the about and the home. And instead what we want is a welcome component. So that's our home screen, if you like. Now let's hook this up. But before we do that, let's boilerplate it. We'll do a template, and then right here we'll do a div with a class of welcome and also a class of container, and inside that I'm just going to do a paragraph tag that says welcome. Okay, and we'll also style that welcome class down here, so .welcome, and I'm going to say text -align center, and padding is going to be 20 pixels top and bottom, 0 left and right. So now let's hook this up inside our router file. Let's go over here to do that. We can delete these two right here. We don't need those, and we don't need the home view either. And instead, let's create our route for the welcome screen. So the path is just going to be /. The name of this is going to be welcome. And then the component is going to be the welcome component. Oops. Spell this correctly, welcome. We need to import that, so we'll say import welcome from, and we want to come out of the current directory into the views folder, and then we want the welcome view, like so. Alright then, so now we have that route set up. Let's just give this a whirl. I'm going to come down here into the terminal and say npm run serve. And then if I scoot this over here, oops, taking a while. I'm going to click on this and bring it over here so that we can see it. And there we go. That is our welcome component right here. Now I'm also going to create a global CSS file, and we'll do that inside assets, and we'll call this main.css. Now inside here, I'm just going to paste in a few styles, which I've got from my GitHub repo. Very simple. Background is kind of like a light grey, and the colour of text is 444, a darker grey. That's for the body. The container class, which is this thing right here, we're going to apply that container to several different things to contain content. The width is 90%, max width 960 pixels, a margin top and bottom of 80 pixels, auto left and right to centralize it, a bit of a border radius, a box shadow to give it a little depth. The background color is white. The color of error text, we don't have any error text yet, but we will show errors later on if they use the wrong credentials or something like that. That's going to be kind of like a pinky color. The font size 14 pixels, and then the styles of any buttons we use as well. Take away the text decoration, background color of this green, the color of the text is white, bold, no border, bit of border radius to soften the corners, and a bit of padding too. So they're the global styles, and they're the different elements that we might use in all the different components, which is why I've placed them inside this global style sheet. Now we need to import that global style sheet so we can use it inside main.js. So I'm going to do that right here, import, and then we want to go into assets, and then we want main.css. So now those will apply all over, and we can see this right here. That looks a bit better. Now one more thing, I'm going to go into app.vue and just remove these two things and save it, and there we go. Okay, so that is the project setup. Next we need to connect to Firebase. So we'll be using Firebase services again in this project, but this time we'll be using Firebase authentication as well as the Firestore database. Now, we can reuse our same Firebase project on the back end for several different front-end projects if we wish, or you can set up a completely new Firebase project by going back to your console, and you can do that right here and then clicking on Add Project. Now, generally, I would use the same Firebase project for different front-end projects that are closely related to each other and that may share the same data and users. But if I have two completely different projects with a different user base and no shared data, I would create different Firebase projects for them. Now, for the sake of this tutorial and to show you how to register multiple front-end projects for the same Firebase project, we'll stick with this one right here. But then when we create our next big project, we'll start a brand new Firebase project for that. So the first thing we need to do to add a new front end to this back end is to add an app right here. So click on that and then click on the web icon right there. We need to give this app a name. I'm going to call it live-chat. And I'm also going to set up Firebase hosting for this app because later on we're going to host this as well. So I'm going to register this app. Then I'm going to click on next. And then ignore this for now. Click on next again and ignore this as well for now. We'll cover all of that later when we come to deploy the website to Firebase hosting. So now we have that extra app. We can click on this over here and go to the settings of the app. And if we scroll down, we want to get the config object right here. So let me grab that. I'm going to copy it, and then over here inside the source folder, I'm going to create a new folder called Firebase. And then inside that, again, we'll create a new file called config.js. So this is the same kind of setup as the last project where we created a Firebase config file, and our Firebase config object is going to live in here. Now, the next thing we need to do is install Firebase locally into this project. So open up a terminal and then say npm install Firebase. And now that's done, we can import what we need inside this file. So first of all, let's come to the top and import Firebase. Import Firebase from Firebase/app. Remember, that is the core part of the Firebase library we always need to import. Then we want to import the Firestore as well. So let's import Firebase/Firestore. Firestore. We're going to use authentication too, but we'll import that later on when we come to use it. For now, I'm going to come down here and init Firebase. So to do that, we say Firebase dot initialize app, and then we pass in our Firebase config, like so. And we also want to initialize Firestore and store that in a constant. So we'll say const project Firestore is equal to Firebase.Firestore. And this is all stuff we've seen before. We're just setting up our Firebase config here, so it should be quite familiar. I'm also going to set up the timestamp that is a Firebase field value, because we will be using it later on to timestamp our chat message documents. So let's say const timestamp is equal to Firebase.Firestore dot field value dot server timestamp. Okay, so let's export these things at the bottom so we can use them in other components later. Project Firestore and also timestamp. And that is pretty much it for now. So we have our Firebase config set up, and we can use the Firestore and timestamps in other components now. So we'll start on the actual website next with the sign up and the login form. Okay, so now I want to create the sign up form and the login form for the welcome screen. So to do that, I'm going to create components inside this folder, because these are not views in themselves. They're just going to be nested inside the welcome view. So let's create a new file, and we'll do the sign up form first. So we'll call this signupform.view. And then inside here, I'm just going to boilerplate this file. And the template, we need a form tag, and we don't need an action. Inside the form for sign up, I want 3 different inputs. I want one for their chosen display name, one for their email, and one for their password. So let's do those 3 input fields. The first one is of type text, and it will be required. And the placeholder will be display name. And also, I'm going to apply a Vue model to this. I will make these data properties later. This one will be called display name. Okay, so let's do another input, and this time it's going to be type email, and this is also going to be required, and the placeholder will be equal to email, and then we want a Vue model applied to this as well, so we can track what the user types in, and that will be email. And finally, we want an input field which is of type password, and then this is required. We also want a placeholder that says password, and we need a Vue model too, so v-model, and set that equal to password. Okay, we need a button finally to press when we want to sign up, and that will just say sign up. Okay, so now let's create these 3 data properties, display name, email, and password, so we can track what a user types. And I'm going to do that inside the setup function, and for this we'll be using refs. So I'll just say right here, refs, and the first one is display name, and I'll set that equal to a ref. Press enter to auto input that right here, and the initial value of this will be an empty string. We also need a ref for the email, and that will be an empty string to begin with. And finally, we need a ref for the password, and again, that is going to be an empty string to begin with. Now, don't forget, we need to return these different values so we can use them in the template as Vue models. So at the bottom, I'm going to return an object and put inside the display name, the email, and also the password. Okay, cool. So finally, I also want to attach a submit event to the form. So I'll say @submit. And remember, we also want to prevent the default action when a user submits the form. So we need to say .prevent to do that. And we'll set that equal to a function, which I'm going to call handle submit. Now, down here, we need to create that function. So I'll say const handle submit and set that equal to a function. And all I'm going to do inside this function for now is just log out the different properties. So console.log, and we'll log out the display name. So display name.value to get the value of that, email.value, and finally password.value. Later on, we'll hook this up to Firebase authentication, but for now, let's just do this. So when we submit the form, it's going to output the values of these different things that are tracking what a user is typing into the different input fields. All right, so now we've done this component, I want to nest it inside the welcome component. So let's do that. First of all, we need to import it. So import, and we want sign up form, and it's from, we come upper level, then go into components, and then / sign up form dot view. We need to register that down here. So components, and it's sign up form, and now we can nest it down here. Sign up form, like so. Okay, so I want to preview this now. So let me open up my terminal, and I'm going to say npm run serve to spin up the local development server. And now I'm going to control click this and bring it way over here into my browser, and that is the sign up form. Doesn't look great, but we will add some styles later on. Okay, so let's just test this out. I'm going to inspect and open up the console. Oops. Go to the console, and then display name Sean, email Sean at thenetninja.co.uk, and password test1234. I'm going to click this, and we get an error. Setup, blah blah blah. Let's have a look. Cannot read property. Okay, so again, we need to come down here in the sign up form, and we need to return handle submit. So that's something that I frequently overlook, and it often causes an error. So make sure you always return the values that you want to use inside your template. I'm going to save this again and refresh. I'm just going to test at test.com and test1234. Very original. And now we can see all of those values. It all works. Okay, so we want to do the same thing, but for the login form as well. So I'll create another component and call this login form.view. And all I'm going to do is copy all of this, and I'm going to paste it in here, and then just make a few little changes. Now this time we don't need a display name when we're logging in. That's just for when we're signing up. But when we log in, we'll do that with the email and the password. So we can delete this ref as well down here. We want a handle submit. This right here is going to be, instead of sign up, login. And then down here, the handle submit, it no longer needs to log out the display name, and we don't need to return the display name at the bottom either. And that is pretty much it. So if I save this, and if I come to the welcome screen, I can now import that as well. So sign up form, I'm going to change this and this to login form, and down here let's add it, login form, and I'm going to down here do login form as well. I'm only going to show one of these, so let me comment out the sign up form for now. Save that and come over here. I'm going to close this and refresh, and then if I put any old email in and do test12345 login, and we can see this works as well. Okay, so let's just address the styles now of these two forms. So what I'm going to do is come to the welcome component, and I'm just going to paste in these styles. Very simple. The welcome form itself, which is either this or this, and it will apply to both because they're ultimately both going to be nested inside this welcome component. And we're applying a width of 300 pixels, a margin top and bottom of 20 pixels, auto left and right to centralize it. The label display as block and give that a bit of margin as well. The input, we say width 100%, a bit of padding, border radius to make it softer at the corners, a border of a light grey, no outline. The colour of the text will be a kind of mid-grey shade, and the margin top and bottom is 10 pixels. So if I save this and preview, now that looks a bit better for the welcome screen. And also, if I show, instead of the login form, the sign up form, this looks okay as well. Alright then, so currently we have both of these forms nested in the welcome components. Now, I don't want to show both at the same time like this because it doesn't look great. Instead, I want to show one at a time. So for example, when they first come to the website, maybe they see the login form. like this. But then I'd like to give them a way to click a link at the bottom that says, okay, if you need to sign up, view the sign up form instead. And then when we go to that, if they want to view the login form, they can click a link to come back. So we need to switch out these two different forms and allow the user to do that. So to do this, we're going to be using a v-if and evaluating a data property. And if that data property is true, we'll show one form. If it's false, we'll show the other. And then clicking on those links at the bottom of those forms, we toggle that data property so it switches between the two. So this will make more sense as we do this. First of all, let's create a setup function because we need a data property, a ref, to track which form to show. So I'm going to call this show login, and I'm going to set that equal to a ref, which I'll hit